Suicide. Let's talk about it. All right, so we're just gonna go off what I know, okay? 15 years experience working in the mental health field or social services, okay? So from what I know, working with those that are experiencing active suicidation or experiencing it myself, there's two different really forms of when we're talking about suicide and suicidation. There is suicide where someone actually commits the act of taking their own life, right? That is active suicide. But suicide ideation is the practice of or the action of idolizing about your death, okay? So these are death fantasies, or in some cases, they turn from fantasies into actual blueprints and plans, right? And so this is why mental health professionals get, concerned and have specific questions to assess a person's fantasy from a blueprint, right? There's certain things that a mental health professional is looking for to confirm that this person doesn't have either access or actual means to move forward with the fantasy, right? That's how we can tell the difference, really, in a nutshell, but there's ways that it's done. That's what they're looking for, right? Because in some of our mental health diagnoses, like bipolar disorder, suicide ideation is just a symptom that's not really going to go away. It can reduce, and with treatment, with therapy and medication, you can keep the ideation very minimal. However, without the medication, there's different intensities of the suicide ideation. People who are of the LGBTQ, I don't know, I feel like I should say words. But anyways, anybody of that population, in addition to the those that are diagnosed with a form of bipolar disorder, are we are of a higher rate of success when it comes to suicide. And that has to do with the social stressors that the LGBTQ population go through, and the true disconnect that they didn't have and still don't have. I won't say that they have today. I think it's just a lot more awareness about LGBTQ. I will not say there's resources for that population. And then the bipolar population, our challenge is that because we go through what is called rapid cycling, is when, like I said before, bipolar is, bouncing between those highs and lows, right? Mania is really high, where you're really hyper, you're really excited about life, and you're almost in this euphoric state, and you can get a lot of things done. Sleep is not really needed. And then you hit your lows, where you're going through things like suicide, depression, you can't get out of bed, things of that nature, right? Well, rapid cycling is when you're going through them really quickly. Typically, a manic episode could last, I'm going off of memory, anywhere between a week to like 3 months, right? And sometimes I've heard them last up to 6, right? And then also, along with the depressive episode, can last up to, you're looking at 2 to 3 weeks, up to 6 months as well, depending on the severity of the chemical imbalance the person may be experiencing, right? So this is all varied per person, right? There's a lot of factors that we have to consider. But one thing's for sure is if you're rapid cycling, which means you're going between mania and depressive states in a really short period of time, I would say between, less than a month, less than 2 to 3 weeks of each other. Like you're in the manic state for 2 to 3 weeks, and then boom, you hit depressive state for 2 to 3 weeks. I would consider that something like rapid cycling, but again, don't quote me, I'm not a psychiatrist. They can provide more detailed information on what exactly the timeline of rapid cycling is. But the overall danger with rapid cycling is that this person is going back and forth between mania and depression, right? And in mania, people with bipolar are extremely creative, thoughtful, and they get things done impulsively, right? So the problem is leaving a depressive state and going straight into a manic state could still take those intensive suicide ideations into an actual state of actually being able to do, create access to, and create means, right? Because now not only are you motivated by the intensive thoughts of the suicide ideation and the fantasy, now you have the energy and the will to move and do. And so that's a very dangerous state of mind for someone to be. So that's why we don't want someone rapid cycling, because suicide is more successful during that time, right? These are things I know. These are things I know from doing my own research and learning about me and knowing what I need to do and give myself. So again, I allow myself to express my emotions the way that I need to express them or let them come out, because I know if I hold mine in, it is no bueno. Okay? There's a way to talk to people when they're in that state of active suicide ideation, where they are actively claiming, death and wanting it and wishing for it and providing valid reasons as why it should come. There's a way to talk to that person, and in a sense they're vomiting, and just like you wouldn't push the vomit back into someone's mouth when it's coming out, you kind of just got to let them let it out, because those are the thoughts that are already ruminating. And no, they do not feel good to hear. No, it is uncomfortable. But this is why we have mental health professionals who are trained to sit in these uncomfortable spaces with people. And this is why I'm selective on who I vent to and how I vent and what I say when I vent, because I understand how uncomfortable it can be for the person on the other end, because I've had to be that person several times in one day. Several times in one day. Okay? So I understand that suicide is not comfortable to talk about, but when a person has expressed that they are in that state, it's very important that we link them to a place where they can vomit. If you are not the person that they can vomit to, that understand, you have to hold your boundaries, because this might be triggersome for you, right? Mental health professionals are trained and even coached and reminded to do things for themselves when they go in and provide some type of emotional support for a client or patient of theirs, right? So unless you're trained and know how to do that, this is a very sticky place for you to be, right? Validate that for yourself, right? And know, if I'm gonna go in here, I'm gonna have to warm up myself emotionally, because I'm gonna have to do things when I'm done to kind of like think of it like COVID. A person who has suicide ideation kind of has COVID of the thinking, right? And if you're not careful, you can take that home with you, that COVID thinking home with you, and not only is it affecting your thinking, but affecting your household thinking, right? It is that serious, right? That domino effect, right? So that's why it's very important when you decide to go into that space with someone that you prepare yourself and armor up. Also, if you decide you're not the person, you can very bluntly say, I see you are hurting, and you're hurting more than what I can offer. And there's a few links that I'm going to provide down below where you can give people, where there's someone on the other that is trained to listen and can listen as long as that person needs to. It is resources that I've used for myself in the past when I just didn't have anyone to talk to, and I felt like I just needed someone to listen to what my problem was and provide a non-judgmental ear. They'll listen to you cry. They also are really good at assessing for active suicidation and to see if there's someone who is at high risk of suicide, so they could in a sense provide support or get that person linked to some actual help if first responders are needed. So I want to go ahead and provide those resources, because these are tough conversations and we can't minimize the fact that it's a profession. We can't minimize that.